So this is the first day in a few days that it's warmed up to temperatures that I can go without a coat. There's still snow on the ground. I haven't filled the water in days. I can't even remember the last time I filled the water because it was so cold. I was pretty certain the water hose would be froze up, so I just thought, well, I'm not even going to deal with it because it's so cold. And it never got above freezing, so I didn't want to lay the hose out, and if it was thawed out, risk it freezing up while I'm trying to get everything hooked up. So I thought today I'd try to give it a go and see if the hose is thawed out. If not, I'll just lay it out in the sun, try again this afternoon. But I do got to get it filled. The tank, like I said, is half empty. But Carolyn's got to do laundry today, so I got to get some water in there so she can do laundry. Obviously, the big news that's going on right now is the Russia-Ukraine crisis going on. And I try not to talk about world events or politics too terribly much. I thought maybe I could give my 2 cents worth. And I mean, we live off grid, and I think a lot of people who watch this channel watch it because they want to be prepared for things like this. Although that is not what my channel is. I don't even consider myself a prepper. I'm not prepared for anything. I just try to live life the best I can off grid. Because I just don't want to be bound to people telling me what I got to do. But a lot of people will consider me a prepper, that I'm prepared for whatever kind of disaster there is. Well, I can think of a bunch of disasters that I have no clue how you'd handle. A flood or a tornado. I mean, obviously I can't survive a tornado. My solar panels, heck, first thing that happened with the tornado, they fly off. I would survive it initially, right? We got a tornado shelter just down the road, just a half a mile or so, that we could go to. We're gonna, one of these days, build our own bunker. But there's a lot of things I can't survive. So that means I'm not prepped, I'm not prepared. So I don't try to fool myself into thinking that I am. But I also don't have to worry about sitting around being scared all the time. But there is this concern with the Russia thing that World War III will break out. I'm going to start the generator here. Give me a second. As of the recording of this video, this is Sunday morning. Russia has just tightened their nuclear deterrent forces. Now, what does that mean? Well, I know what it means for the United States. And before I get into this, I want to give my little qualifier like I'm some sort of expert in the subject. The only expertise I have was I was on a submarine that carried ballistic missiles. Now, I'm not going to give you all the details of that because when I left the military, I promised I wouldn't talk about it, about all that secret information. I don't know if it's still secret or not, but I made a promise, so I'll keep that promise. So, but I was on a submarine that did have capability of launching nuclear missiles. Today, that submarine has been converted. It's the USS Georgia. It was actually recently in the news. I think down in Iran, it got mixed up with a little conflict. It used to be called an SSBN. Now it's called like an SS, I don't know, SN? I don't know. But it's actually changed its call signal. The missiles that we carried were, I guess, the second largest when I was in the Navy. Because there was the submarine base in Georgia. I was in Washington. Submarine base in Georgia had the most modern of the times when I was in the Navy. I don't even know what we got now, don't care. But I do have some qualifications, I guess, to talk about a nuclear war. I don't want to get too specific. We also had a reactor on the submarine. It was a nuclear reactor. That's how we powered it. I was a machinist mate, which means I was not a nuclear machinist mate, for those who are going to ask. I was the Ford machinist mate. I dealt with the diesel generator, which was an emergency generator, and the hydraulics and refrigeration and plumbing and sewage and all that. I spent 4 years in the Navy. I got to E5, got out, went back to Missouri. This brings back a lot of memories, obviously, of the 80s. I don't know who remembers the 80s as much. It just seems odd that we're back at this thing that we were. When I came home from the Navy, I always claimed I got out in 94. and I always claimed I was the one that ended the Cold War, because that's when it ended. It was sometime in the 90s when USSR collapsed. The reason I struggled to tell you when I got out was I actually got out early in the Navy, just by a few months. At the time, Clinton was given an early out program. He wanted to reduce the size of the military, and I was pretty disenfranchised with what was going on in the military at the time. You'll have to go back and search history on why I might have gotten out, because I'm not going to talk about politics here. There was a significant change getting ready to happen on submarines that I didn't agree with, and a lot of people got out at that time because of it. But I did learn quite a bit about nuclear stuff, you know, ballistic missiles, reactors. Even though I wasn't a reactor, you had to qualify submarines so you could have your little dolphins on your chest. And so you spent a couple years qualifying. I was able to do it in a year and a half. I took my first qual meeting, my qualification board, the first year, and I missed a question and they didn't think I was ready. So I studied up, and by my next patrol I was qualified. So I'd actually gotten qualified a little bit earlier than most. I was pretty proud of that. But I wanted to talk to you about all this mess that's going on. I know there's a lot of talk of, now that Putin's kind of flexing his muscles with his nuclear missiles, his warheads, you know, what's the response? And I would be guessing on what the response is, but my immediate response would be he would attack a European country, maybe Germany, I don't know. And in retaliation, the United States would have to retaliate, and so then the missiles would just start flying. At least that's the way it would have been, something like that during the Cold War. It would be pretty destructive on both sides, and I've never understood the point of it. The whole point of a submarine was to deter a nuclear attack. It was called mutually assured destruction. If it were to happen, there is ways to protect yourself against it. And the three things they always taught you in the Navy was time, distance, and shielding. And so what is time? Time means limit your time exposed to the radiation. Like if I come out in the sun right now and I spend a few seconds out here, I'm not going to get a sunburn. But if I stand out in the sun for hours on end, I'm going to get a real nasty burn. Really, the way to think about radiation is like fire. Time, distance, and shielding. If I put my hand over a flame and I rush it by real fast, I won't burn myself. Or in hot water. You know, if I put my hand in hot water real quick, you could probably even put your hand in boiling hot water if you're fast enough, and you wouldn't burn yourself. The amount of time you expose yourself to that heat. Same thing with radiation. And then you have distance. The further away you are, the safer you are. The less you're going to be exposed. Again, like fire. If you're right on top of a fire, you're going to get all that heat. But as you get back away from the fire, it's not so hot. And the same thing with radiation. It will die off. And then shielding, if you got up to the fire with a shield or something that can hold back the heat, you wouldn't feel any of the effects of the heat. Same thing. What's going to happen is if there's an explosion, nuclear explosion, it will generate a bunch of dust and throw it up in the air. And that dust is what's contaminated now. And what happens is now the clouds and the wind will carry it across the country, and as it settles down, that radiation will fall down on you, the dust, the radiated dust. You got to keep yourself from getting exposed to that dust. Well, the distance part, if you survive the initial blast, I should say, is going to be a little bit difficult because the dust is falling on you. So that means you got to have time and shielding, your time of exposure. So if you come outside, you better only come outside for a few seconds. Shielding is the thing that is going to protect you the most. The biggest ones are water, concrete, and lead. Those are the three things that will absolutely shield you no matter what. You get underground and build yourself a concrete bunker, yeah, you'd be all right. But things like this metal house would actually protect you quite well, especially if the blast was several hundred miles away. Glass will actually protect you pretty well, assuming you're a good distance away from the blast. The only problem we would have is our front door. Now we have metal that we can put on the door. Now then the only thing that would be left that we'd have to worry about was trying to like fill our water Our water would be okay because it's in a well, and then we put it in a tank, so it's not going to be getting dusty from all that dust and fallout. So what I would do is probably rig this hose up, because it's warming up. We're not going to have to worry about freezing temperatures, and just leave it out here. Then I can just start up the generator, maybe put the generator on the back porch, start it up real quick, let the tank fill up. As long as I keep the dust out of the tank, I'll be okay. The one thing I would worry about here is the firewood. The firewood would get dusty. So if there was an attack, I would immediately grab a bunch of firewood, bring it into the house, and leave it in the house. And then over time, there's nothing good about this. I would be fooling myself if I would think that I could survive this. I'm not even going to worry much more than what I've just said. It's a futile effort. I'm just going to try to be as happy as I possibly can, living a good life until the life ends. And that's just my goal. It's not about prepping. No matter what's going to happen, either I'll die right away or I'll die from cancer from the radiation eventually. So it's just the way it is. It's just, there's no way around it. Japan recovered. It got through it. It was not pretty when their bombs were dropped on Japan. I don't mean to try to scare everybody today. I just wanted to tell you some options that you could if you're a big time prepper. Food, or the solar panels probably wouldn't generate any more electricity because the sun would be clouded up from the dust for a while. So the refrigerator, of course, we wouldn't need any electric then. We'd have to save the generator just to get water out of the well. If you'll click onto this up next box, I'd really appreciate it. It'll take you over to my other channel. Find some humor instead of all this fear. I hope I can inspire you to not be afraid. Thanks for watching.